everybody, I'd like to call the meeting to order.
Okay, are we ready?
I think we are, yeah. This is the Dover, one of the Dover informational sessions for the Act 46 consolidation. And I'm going to let Rich take over and kind of explain what we're doing tonight.
So just so everybody knows, because if you've been following the Act 46 at all, we're all trying to become famous and we want to be on TV. So we have Rich over there, he videotapes us, but we're supposed to ignore him and not like wave to him or ask him questions or anything. But it's a lot of fun if you can get a big knowledge in. So if you need a bathroom, it's over there. We ask you not to use this one just because you'll have to walk in front of the camera. If you go in that door there, you can go get food. It's not as good as the 6th grade makes, but I know Jill cooked, and I know Selena made something, and I don't know who else.
It was Lucy, wasn't it?
Lucy. What'd you make, Lucy?
Brownie.
Brownies, there you go. So what could be better than a brownie on a cold winter night in Dover? So we're gonna we have Felicity here, who's from the Brattleboro, from the Marlboro College, and she's a trained facilitator, so she's gonna work with us, and she's gonna take over with Sarah kind of keeping control, because we went to Marlboro, and Dan, was there about 80 people there, you think?
Boy, I must have been near there. I didn't actually count them, but maybe even more. It wouldn't have surprised me.
So for the last several months, between the Marlboro contingent, which we're all spread out today with Wardsboro, and the Dover, we've been having meetings for Act 46. One of the questions that we got asked a lot was, what is Act 46? And that's really a hard issue to pinpoint. I've looked on the line a number of times to see if there was a really good definition of Act 46, because we've heard it's about governance, we've heard it's about saving money, we've heard it's about more educational opportunity. The title of the law is Act 46, an act relating to making amendments to education funding, education spending, and education governance. We as boards throughout the state have been looked at our local governance and see if there's an opportunity for working together at larger governance structures to create more opportunities for our students. We've been doing this in Windham Central for the last 2 years. When Act 46 first came out, at Windham Central, we voted to start having monthly meetings, and we were really well attended. We had at least one member from every board come to these meetings, and we were looking at our school structures, and we found a lot of us are very similar, and we were looking for the same thing for our students. We all want the best education for our students, and we want to have a reasonable tax rate, something that we can afford. Some of the guidelines we've been working on have come from both the law and the State Board of Education. Early in the process, we presented some different models of governance we were presented to us. The state said, here's some different levels of governance. One is their preferred model. It's called a supervisory district, where a supervisory union is the governance body, and all the schools underneath of it are all part of that district, and there's all just one board and one governance structure. You know, that works really well in places like Burlington, where you have several elementary schools, a couple middle schools, and a high school, and they're all controlled by the same group of people, and that's a supervisory district. One of the things they were looking for was a minimum of 1,000 students, I think 990, I don't remember the numbers. But there were lesser models, and some of those models one of the models was what's called a side-by-side, and that's what we're trying to create here. Now, you can ask, we have all our board members, or all our committee members tonight, but one from Dover, and I would almost bet dollars to donuts, you ask any one of them, you know, they had better ways to spend Thursday nights and come to the meeting, seeing Rich and getting videotaped and waving to the camera. It's nothing that we wanted to do, but it is something that we felt was important to do. We could have done nothing at all, and we just didn't feel that doing nothing was an option, because it's just not, the state can do to us whatever they want to do to us, or they can put us in a district, or they can move us around, and we'll talk about that in a few minutes. But after having a study with Windham Central, we thought the best option would be a side-by-side with Dover, Wardsboro, and Marlboro that all have high school choice to be one side, but it would require either Dover and Wardsboro to join a 7th and 8th grade program with Marlboro, or would require Marlboro to lose their 7th and 8th grade program, which is a really important program to them, and their citizens, their parents, and their students. The other part of this, for this all to work, is the Leland and Gray towns have to also agree to become a district. And I'm pretty sure, if I remember right, you guys can correct me, there's only 2 necessary on the Leland and Gray side. I think it's Newfane and Brookline. And so if they agree to it, then they would form one side and we would be the other side of the side by side. If Leland and Gray doesn't happen, then we wouldn't have a side, so a lot of what we're doing would be for naught. The only problem is that it does give us options in the future to say, hey, we've done all this study, we've looked into this, we think we would make a good group, Dover, Marlboro, and Wardsboro, and we talked it all out, we all voted for it, let us be an alternative structure. If you become one of their preferred structures, they did give us some incentives, and some of those incentives are, there's a voluntary merger grant of $150,000 that allows the district to work together to form the new policies, procedures, work on staff, work on transportation, all the issues that are important. There's an 8, 6, 4, and 2, so over the next 4 years there would be a tax decrease of 8 cents, 6 cents, 4 cents, and 2 cents on the tax rate. The small school grant becomes another merger grant, and the hold harmless, where we get phantom students or where your student population is dropping so quickly that if you took that full hit in 1 year, you would lose enough money that it would be hard to keep your program going without huge tax increases. Those will all stay in one form or another. But however, if we don't merge or we don't do something, there is no guarantee that we would lose the small school grant, but there's no guarantee that we would keep it either. From day one, Windham, because of the strengths of the individual schools, and I know they're going to have some computers to show the programs, the 3 schools are all very well loved by their communities. They're supported well by their communities, and I'm not aware of a budget ever being voted down in any one of the 3 towns that are here before you tonight for their school district. That being said, we were hoping to find some other opportunities for students, and we were hoping to be able to give you a list of 100 things that would say this is the greatest thing and this is why that you should vote for this. Unfortunately, we've been a pretty strong supervisory and we've been pretty good and strong school boards. We didn't find a lot of savings or a lot of educational opportunities or a lot of things that we could say that this is the greatest thing to come along to education in the last 20 years. What we can say, though, is that the state is making some changes. The state's looking at changes. The state does not like the smaller governance. The state has made a lot of moves against our smaller governance. We are now not allowed to own our own buses. We're supposed to have all this transportation be done at the supervisory union level. We've been very fortunate that Dover and Marlboro have had waivers from the Commissioner of Education the last few years, but there was a big article in the paper last year where Pownell got refused or were turned down for their waiver. There's also all the special education now runs through the central office. Okay, I'm going to stop then. So,
There's a reason why we have a facilitator. Doing her job.
So anyway, so please understand, we're not going to be able to give you all sorts of answers, but just the one thing to remember is that if you do approve this new district and it does move forward, the people that are going to run this new district are the people that are running your districts now. It's good the voters or the board members come from that same group of people. So I can't see any reason why the good things that are happening now wouldn't continue to happen. Thank you.
Can Rich have just another minute to explain Marlboro's situation relative to Dover and Wardsboro?
Well, we're going to get there. We'll
Okay.
just, that's all going to get covered
Okay.
in the presentation as we
Okay.
go along. The idea of the introduction was to really lay out what Act 46 is. So just so that everybody understands the context of the discussion. And what I'm going to do, we were going to have a projector here, so that I could project things that would reinforce what it is I'm going to say. Unfortunately, I have the screen and you guys don't, so I'm going to read from it. As Rich said, my name is Felicity Rattay, and I have done some facilitation, but I'm definitely not a professional at it. So And the idea, I want to just explain what the procedure of this meeting is. This is a meeting to explain to you guys what the content of the Articles of Agreement is, so that you will be informed when you go to vote either yay or nay on them, not on the content of them. In other words, you can't say we want to change this, we want to change that. All you get to do is vote yes or no to a unified district. The Articles of Agreement have already been approved by the state. But you should definitely know what the content of them is, and that's what you can learn about in this meeting. So what we're going to do is each member of the committee, first Selena is going to introduce the committee and a bit about the process. Then each member of the committee is going to explain major pieces of the Articles of Agreement under these categories: educational opportunities, taxes, and the timeline and process. And at the end of each one of those introductory sessions, you will get an opportunity to write your questions, and then we're going to put them on the sticky wall, and then they will have some brief period of time to answer the questions. Every question that doesn't get answered here will get answered online on the blog that the committee is operating. So this is really an opportunity for you to ask questions and get answers, and not necessarily for a discussion, a back and forth discussion. Although if there's time, and there are fewer of you than we had last time, so there might be more opportunity to have a freer discussion. And this meeting is going to go until 8:30, and then it's going to end, although members of the committee have said they will stick around if people want to stay and ask questions. I've already explained what this meeting is. The goals for the meeting are to gain an understanding of the substance of the Articles of Agreement that frame a unified school district, and to understand the implications of a yes vote and a no vote on the creation of a new unified school district to be called the River Valleys Unified School District. And this meeting is the first meeting that's taking place in Dover. There is going to be a second meeting, substantively the same, although different depending upon who's going to be there, on Monday, February 27th. There's another meeting in Marlboro. The first meeting was last week. The second one is Monday, February 13th, if you want to show up to that. The meeting in Wardsboro, the first meeting in Wardsboro is the 23rd of January, next Monday, if you want to show up to that. And that second meeting in Wardsboro is Thursday, February 2nd. So those timelines are going to be available to you guys online. So now, Selena.
Hi, everyone. I'm Selena Romo. I'm a board member from Marlboro, and I'm also a board member on this committee. Randy, I think we'll just kind of go down the table. Yeah, let's just say who we all are.
Randy Capitani, and I'm from Dover.
Dan MacArthur from Marlboro.
Laura Sibilia from Dover.
Dwight Borum from Wardsboro.
Rich Warner from Dover.
Lucy Gratwick from Marlboro.
Mike Murphy from Wardsboro.
Jill Dean from Wardsboro.
Thank you. So Rich did a really good job kind of introducing what we've been doing over the last year and a half or so. But one of the things that, as a study committee, that was really, really important to us was that each one of our schools is very dear to all of us, and that what we do, even though it's different, is special and unique, and we want to maintain that throughout this whole process. So we decided that we needed a vision statement to guide us through all of our conversations, whether we were talking about, how many board members, the representation there was going to be, and whatever it was we were talking about. So this was our vision statement that we came up with. So with respect for each town's local identity, we envision a unified school district that will represent how the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. By sharing resources and talents, we believe this alliance can provide students and teachers access to increased educational opportunities and improved services. We became a legal entity as a board back in July. We've been meeting several times a month since then throughout the various towns. We had a consultant that was assigned to us by the state, John Everett, and he did lots of research for us, and we all did lots of homework in the process. And also, I have to say, as a committee, I have a lot of respect for the people that are sitting here tonight. Like, we worked really hard and to maintain what we all really believe in and want to work together. So, thank you all. And we really, our focus was on the students. If you need more information when you leave here tonight and you're like, I really want to watch the meeting from November, whatever, we have a blog site. You can link to it from the WCSU website. There's a tab there, it says Act 46 information. You go there, it has our blog site, has all the articles of agreement on there. There's minutes on there. And then the slideshows, which the computers are currently sleeping. Another part of our process was a lot of communication with our principals. So the principals put together little slideshows that tell us all a little bit about each other's schools. Because for some of you, you probably have never been in Marlboro School or Wardsboro School, which was true last week when we were in Marlboro. Several folks have never been in either school. So it's nice to just kind of get a look and see what we're all doing. And from here, I'm actually going to turn things over to Dwight to talk about educational opportunities, which was, yes.
15 minutes.
And this is one of the first overarching goals of Act 46 is
Dwight, do you
educational.
need this?
Yeah, if you want to guide yourself with the slideshow.
Sure.
It's just.
Oh, thanks. So, educational opportunities. One thing that the state really insisted from us and kept us to task was to make sure that the idea of opportunities for the students was met. And became evident early on from meeting with this group that this was very important to all of us. And I know I'm not speaking for the rest of the group, but for me, personally, this was very important to me that idea was met. The challenges we had was we couldn't be specific. You can't say each school must have Spanish or each school must have, whatever it may be, a music program or these kind of things. And what we were put to task was to create articles for the next board to enforce. We're kind of presenting the blueprint of what needs to be done for that board to enact. So you can't really be specific, but on the same time, you have to make sure that the board is given the tools they need to make those things happen. But during the process, we kind of got bogged down a little bit by the nuts and bolts of a lot of the other things that were also we needed to do. Whether it be the tax element or just transportation, all these other issues that we need to discuss. And I'm not saying we got off track a little bit, but some of our the public that came to our meetings kind of told us, hey, what about the opportunities? So we got back on track and made sure that those things were addressed. So much so that we were able to put in the Articles of Agreement, if you haven't read it, the very first article, and I'll read it to you, for the Articles of Agreement for the new school district reads, Article 1, the Unified Board will act in the best interests of its students. In order to maximize the opportunities available to all students, the Unified Board will allow for educational opportunities provided at each school to be extended to all students in the district. In addition, the board will seek opportunities for schools to share resources, educational programs, materials, and faculty expertise. The Unified Board will work towards enhancing educational opportunities that may become available for the benefit of all students in the district, including expanding curriculum, maximizing available technology, and introducing learning procedures or educational programs. The board will ensure that these opportunities are made available to all students in the district. So what does that say? So it says basically, if something is available in one school and not another, a parent could come to the board, the new board, and say, hey, what about our school? We're not getting the same things that school's doing. And it's thrust upon that board to work towards making sure those opportunities are available at the other schools. So I thought that was really important that we were able to get that accomplished and to make sure. Now, does it say specifically? No. But it holds them at task to make sure that gets done. What else? So Selena talked about the individuality of the schools. That was also something that was very important. And so does that mean all schools need to be exactly the same? No, but it does mean that the opportunities need to be there, because it was important for us to also make sure that schools maintain their individuality, but at the same time have the same opportunities for all the kids. So that's kind of where we went with that. Let's see what notes I have for me here. Met with the principals, and it was a great experience to realize what the other things that were going on at the other schools. And we came to realize that Wardsboro doesn't have Spanish, for example, and the other two schools do. And I think that would be something that would be kind of interesting. I was actually going with my son last night. We were online to Duolingo, and he was really interested in it. Like, this would be great to have him do that at at that school as well. So I think this district will allow for that. But in addition to that, there are other things that can create opportunities or at least shared resources, whether it be teachers, substitute teachers, like for example, can go from school to school. Perhaps there's a Spanish teacher who may be working part-time that could go to all 3 schools and become a full-time teacher, something along those lines. So it was difficult because we couldn't say exactly what to do, but on the other hand, it puts it on them to make those things happen if they so choose to do so. All right. Let's see.
The list is right on the screen here.
Oh, thanks. Oh, okay. All right, so let's see. Opportunity. Establishing elementary school choice was one of the opportunities, of course. It also gives the articles give the opportunity for students to go from school to school. Now, that is something that also we have to wrestle with a little bit. Does that mean that any school kid can go to any school they want? Not necessarily. They still would need to get approval from the school board. The school board would need to approve that and take it on a case-by-case basis. That's kind of how we structured that. So, plus transportation always is an issue as well. So, again, this gives the ability to do those kind of things, but within reason and at the board's discretion, the new board's discretion. Shared programs, we talked about that. Single teacher agreement. Any teacher who is hired will no longer be hired by the individual schools, but will be hired by the school district itself. So, which will help with the ability to move from school to school if need be, to be put in a better position, and also will be a larger district, which we hope will attract better teachers for the district as a whole, which may not be the case at smaller schools. Let's see. Training and attracting quality teachers. Maintaining secondary choice. That's something that was very important to our districts. So that's one of the reasons that Rich mentioned we're continuing to, we partnered with the schools that we did for secondary choice. That also, Dover right now, currently, schools have a little different way of going about how that's paid for, secondary choice, for grades 7 through 12. The new way of going about it will be one district. So whatever the policy will be the same policy for all three schools, all 3 towns. Currently, I think Dover pays up to the Burton cost to attend that school and become a sending town. Wardsboro currently pays the statewide average. Once we are a full district, then it will be one policy for all the students in those policies. Right, and that policy is determined each year by the board of elected. Shared substitute teacher pool, and special education costs. Special education costs, as we know, can be somewhat of a burden to towns, but by having a larger district, you're spreading the cost over a larger pool of taxpayers. So that's a benefit as well. Oh, technology, there's more. Okay. All right. So what's the downside? The consequences of unification not aligned with the goals of Act 46. Consequences can be 1, potential inequalities of access due to transportation. So what they're saying here is, let's say you want to send your kid to a different school and you can afford to drive them every day, then that creates some inequality there. If Marlboro were to join the district, they would need to close their 7th and 8th grade school for them, and they'd have choice. So that would be a large change for them that they're discussing now. And the other thing I discussed that was the potential shift in choice for Dover, how we'll be paying for school choice in the grades 7 through 12. I think that's all I have then. Anything else that I missed? We're good? All right. Thank you.
So, done? Okay. So the idea now is that you have 5 minutes to write your questions on these pieces of paper. And feel free to chat amongst yourselves. And then post your questions, grab a piece. And the idea is it's color-coded so that I can keep track of which questions in which category. So if you have a question in another category, either you can go ahead and write it on the blue sheet, but just title it taxes. Or like if you have a burning question about taxes that you're afraid you're going to forget, feel free to write it down now.
One question per sheet?
One question per sheet would be helpful, yes.
Okay.
But if you want to put more, it's fine. And then you can stand up and post them under educational opportunities.
And one of the reasons.
Point in fact though, guys, if you want to ask a question outside of this category, we have all the other colors of papers, so just request
It'd be
them.
great to have them so that as
Okay,
ideas
yeah.
come through,
Yeah.
then we can start writing things down.
So taxes are green, timeline is sort of orange, and then the other is yellow. So anything that's not in those categories. So there's green. Actually, there's a parcel of questions here, so we're probably not going to get through all of them. We have 5 minutes for questions, and I'm starting the timer now. And so I'm just going to start. You guys want to take a seat, or are you happy standing up? How is Dover's IB program, everybody understands what IB stands for, right? Affected? Can Marlboro and Wardsboro child attend Dover? And then I'm afraid I can't read the handwriting, but it has something to do, is the IB program going to be district-wide?
So the IB program just automatically doesn't become, all the schools get it. There's certain requirements that they're going to need in each building, even though it's all one big school. We've had this discussion, Dwight was trying to talk about earlier. There's no way we couldn't write in there that the IB program is guaranteed to occur, because that's tying the hands of the board. What if in 5 years we find out that the IB program wasn't what we thought it was? We can't get rid of it because it's in the articles, it was voted on by the voters. So the IB program will still move forward in Dover because we're going to respect every school's individuality for the first few years, but that decision will be a decision made by the new board.
Does that answer the question? Okay. There is a full-time library position to save dollars, question mark. That sounds like a question that somebody understands what that means. Full-time library position to save dollars.
You talk about sharing resources.
Right.
One librarian for
Library.
all 3 schools versus each school has their own.
That's self-serving.
That again is a decision of the new board. The new board will have to determine how much time is needed, and does it make sense to hire one full-time person? Does it make sense to do it the way we're doing it now? What is needed? What is the library doing besides librarian? The state standard is 1 librarian for every 300 students. There's probably 300 students if we add all 3 schools up, so it's a full-time librarian. But do they do other things in the school also that maybe we can't just have one person do all 3? So it's a decision for the new board again.
Can I clarify something too?
Yeah, please.
So when boards are discussing budgets, it comes from the principals. The principals at all the schools develop a budget with their staff, bring it to the board, and says, this is, then we go through things and figure out how it works. So it's not like the boards work in partnership with the principals to create budgets that work for the students already, and that would continue to happen. Same way, the only difference would be it'd be one larger board with 9 people and 3 principals instead of 3 or 5 people currently with 1 principal.
And again, it's not going to be done in a secret room somewhere with no, it's going to be done in open public meetings with input from parents, public, students, staff, just like it is done now. There'll be meetings to discuss the budget before you have a chance to vote, and then you'll have a chance to vote on the budget, just like you do now.
So I'm going to the next question, which I think might talk a little bit more towards this basic idea. The apathetic response from Dover residents needs to be interpreted as we don't really care, and our school board will recommend the right choice. What is Plan B?
Great question.
I can tell you from the Dover's discussions we've had, is if this gets voted down, or if the other side doesn't come on board, or if Dover and Wardsboro are the only ones that vote for it and the other side doesn't come on board, we'll look to do an alternative structure. We will still keep Marlboro involved because Marlboro has some paths they have to go, because remember, they have a little tougher decision than us. They have a very ingrained 7-8 program that they value highly. And we'll go to the state and say, hey, look, we tried to do what you want us to do. We couldn't do it. It's not our fault. We did what we could. let's move forward and approve us as an alternative structure. If the voters of Dover say, no, we don't want to combine with anybody, and they voted down overwhelmingly, we'll go to state and ask for an alternative structure. We're just going to ask the public for some input, because we're going to need a lot of support when we go fight Montpelier.
Can I add to that?
Yeah, go ahead.
I think it's really important to realize that the one thing that won't happen is it won't be life as usual, or it won't be the school the way it was 5 years ago. It's just the reality of where the state is headed. And some of you might have read some of the editorials I write. I'm not a big fan of Act 46, but I do think this gives us a good way to control our own fate. We have to do it in partnership with another town, or maybe 2 other towns, but as Rich said earlier, the other side of it is we don't know what will happen. They could put us in with a different group. So that's something to really consider. And it's tough to comprehend something that is so nebulous at this point. And that's really what it is. You know, you can't predict the future. This is not a concrete roadmap to where things are going to be. It's just to set off in a direction. And if we don't go in that direction, there's still going to be a lot of hard work to go ahead. There's going to have to be another committee that's going to have to set up an alternative structure, whether it's with another district or on our own. So there's still a lot of work to be done. Whether you vote yes or no on this particular one, which is certainly everybody's option, this is not going away by any stretch of the imagination.
Elizabeth, can
So
I?
that's actually 5 minutes
Okay.
time. Do you
Yeah.
have some small thing you want to add, or?
Well, I was just gonna get into Marlboro's situation, but we can do it another time perhaps.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna ask a question which you guys can then mull over for the next 20 minutes, and then you can answer in the open session, because it seems like it's an important question. I'm sure everybody's interested in the response. So this is not to be answered right away. If the state wasn't pushing consolidation, would any of the 3 boards see advantages to doing so? Okay, so we're gonna move. We are going to move now to the second category, which is the financial implications for taxpayers. And who's presenting?
So, I like taxes. Because I like taxes, it makes the world go round. So, something that I'm guaranteed of is going to happen all the time. So, talk about what happens if we do go through this merger, things go together. So we get some money from the state of Vermont. We get a $150,000 merger grant. That's to help the new board set up and be prepared and do whatever we need to do for the new district. We also get to keep our small school grant. So just using Wardsboro and Dover, because we're the necessaries, it winds up being around $200,000. And that's on a different piece of paper, and I don't have it. Dover gets around 78, and Wardsboro gets 1.
I don't have them memorized.
116?
116.
Oh, that's you guys? Yeah. So they get more. Wardsboro gets more.
Dover gets 61,111.
This year, yeah. Last year, 78. What do the other 2 get?
Wardsboro is 83,595, and Marlboro is 1,116. And
100.
116,622.
So that money, now, again, there's a little bit of a disagreement. I don't know, I would not say we're going to get to keep it, but there's also nothing that says we're going to lose it either. If we form the merger, we get to keep it because it doesn't become a small school grant anymore. It becomes a merger incentive grant. Eventually, it goes away when the legislature takes it away from us. We get a savings on the tax rate. We just get a savings on the tax rate. But remember, you can't take the Dover tax rate or the Wardsboro tax rate or the Marlboro tax rate and say, okay, we're taking 8 cents off of that, because it's not that tax rate anymore. You get the savings on the combined tax rate. So whatever this new board votes for a budget, the gurus with the computers and have a lot more letters after their name than I do. Some of Chip's kin, wherever Chip is, will punch it into their calculators, and they'll come up with a blended tax rate numbers. They'll say, Dover, your share of this is whatever it is, and then the money comes off of that. So it's not just, we can't just take the Dover tax rate, take 8 cents off and say that's what your tax rate's gonna be, because we can't tell until the new budget's voted on. If we looked at just taking the current structure and putting it all together and running the numbers that way, it actually, Dover winds up saving about 4 cents in the first year. Marlboro saves around 20 cents, and Dover saves 4 cents, Wardsboro 6, and Marlboro 20. Marlboro has a little higher per pupil spending, but they also get more income to offset that with their bigger small school grant. A lot of that's because they have more grades. And I think we've got about the same number of students, or pretty close to the number of students. The consequences of not aligning is that they can take our small school grant away. There is no hold harmless, or there is no phantom students. The problem with phantom students is Dover's up 10 this year. Our CLA, or not our CLA, our weighted average daily membership jumped 10 students. I know Marlboro was either very stable or up a little bit. They have no phantom students, but Wardsboro does have 6 phantom students. And at around $12,000 a student, it's another $70,000 that Marlboro, or that Wardsboro gets in their budget that may go or would go away, because will be no more hold harmless. And it'll be a little different, like Randy said. It's not going to be business as usual, but it'll be very similar, and it's very similar to what happens at Leland and Gray now, and very similar to what happens in the Twin Valley. There'd be a unionized budget put together, there'd be meetings to present it, and then you vote on it. And the first year you have to vote on it by ballot. It's required by law. But after that first year, we can have a discussion, and we can say we can have a public meeting like we do now for town meeting and vote a budget that way. But that would require an affirmative vote of the electorate of the 2 or 3 towns. And that is pretty much it on budgets and taxes.
Do you want to talk a little bit about the consequences? The
I did.
potential negatives?
I did.
The
Loss of the grants, the loss of
well,
school.
the potential difficulty in understanding larger unified budget for citizens?
Okay.
The need to find new ways to engage citizens in school budget discussions?
So the first year, you're going to have to vote by Australian ballot. I really enjoy, and a lot of people, I think, like town meeting, would be able to come to town meeting, and if you have a question about the budget, you get to ask the question, you get an answer. If you're voting by ballot, Australian ballot, you can't do that. So there would have to be informational meetings. You're spread out over 3 towns right now. If you live in Dover, you come to Dover, you vote in Dover, you could stand up, you raise your hand, you can ask questions, it's all done, you move on. That wouldn't happen with this joint district. The vote would have to be in your individual towns if it's by ballot with no discussion of it, or there would be, the vote would be, if you voted to have it by hand vote or from the floor, then you're not going to have 3 meetings in 3 towns. You'll have 1 meeting in whichever town you decide to have it in. You could rotate it between towns, but that doesn't have to happen. A larger budget, everybody looks at Windham Central's budget and their eyes glaze over. This would be maybe a little different, but I think you can make it a lot easier. We've made Windham Central's, people's eyes used to glaze over the Dover budget. We've kind of got that figured out pretty well. Ways to engage the citizens. It is a little bit harder because it is in town meeting and there isn't one location where you go to everything. So we would probably have to have more informational meetings, much like we're having now. We're having 6 of these meetings, 2 in each town, to explain Act 46. And the location of a unified board meeting. So if you decide to have a meeting one year in Marlboro on Route 9 and you get a little bit of ice and snow, what happens to Route 9 when you get a little bit of ice and snow, Doug? You ain't getting there from here. So, yeah, you gotta go the back way. So it does create some issues with travel and getting around, where now, the worst you have to go to is your town. But, for me, when the road's open on the back way, the Lower Dover Road, it's quicker for me to get to Marlboro almost as it is to get to Dover. It's not all that much difference, it seems, in traveling. But when Lower Dover Road isn't open, it takes forever to go all that way around. So those are the kind of potential negatives. Plus, there's a larger group of people voting for it, and it's harder to get the word out.
Okay, great. So now we go around again, and you can ask your financial questions. There were a couple of questions in the education opportunities that ended up being sort of financial, so I tacked them up to the financial section. And the ones that didn't get answered, I put back over there, but they will get answered online. Okay, so I'm going to get started because I think the answers to these questions are going to take some time. So here's one that might not take too much time. The Dover School District capital reserves. who gets those dollars? Are we allowed to spend it all prior to the merger?
No, we want it.
So basically, the law states that all assets on the day that the district starts operation is formed is all assets get transferred to the new district, as do all debts. None of the schools have any capital debt. We're all free and clear of that. The reserves vary from town to town. Dover does have some pretty large reserves. Wardsboro has some pretty decent reserves, and Marlboro has reserves. And the answer, and can you spend them beforehand? The voters decide what to spend and how to spend it. So the voters do whatever the voters want to do. But I would hope that that everybody would try to come into this, if we're all in agreement, that we would all come into it with some money, because there's going to need to be some reserves. That's what's allowed Dover to not be involved with overages and penalties. And, I would hope that we would do the same for a new district.
Okay, equaling the teacher contract, how does the pay scale compare?
The pay scales are a little different. There's 2 union and 1 non-union. But what would happen is the staff gets to vote whether or not they want to be union or not be union, and then they would negotiate with the new board. So I can't tell you what it would look like because there's no negotiations yet.
Let me say that. Lots of expanded programs to make things equal. Aren't those going to bring lots of expanded programs to make things equal? Don't those include potential costs?
Yeah, that's fine.
What did you say? Sorry.
Oh,
Lots of
I'll take this.
So I'm going to repeat the question one more time. There are lots of expanded programs to make things equal that you guys described in your introduction. What are the potential costs of these and how are they going to be dealt with? Yeah, go ahead.
So, I think that's something I had a hard time getting my arms around until our consultant sort of used a good example of that, but I'll get back to that. There won't necessarily be homogenized programs in every school. In fact, there won't be homogenized programs in every school. So what Wardsboro is doing, Wardsboro is going to continue to do. What Marlboro is doing, Marlboro is going to continue to do. And what Dover is doing, Dover is going to continue to do. So it goes back to, I know there was a question earlier about the IB program, and would that be extended to Marlboro or Wardsboro? Could be, may not be. One of the things that we talked about as a group, by offering school choice to parents of the elementary school age students, is if there was a program in Marlboro, for instance, that a parent in Dover really liked, you could apply and have your kid potentially go to Marlboro. Or if you like something in Wardsboro. Or if it was more convenient for you to send your kid to Wardsboro because you work in that direction. Those would all be opportunities that the new unified district could offer. And one of the things that really put it in perspective to me was when we were working with our consultant, John, who had been a superintendent of schools in a number of districts around the state. And he talked about being one in South Burlington. And he said South Burlington had 3 elementary schools, 1 or 2 middle schools, I forget, and a high school. And he said the elementary schools were distinctly different. And he said you walk into that building and they each had their own culture, and they were all very proud of that culture within that building. And you walk into another building and a very different culture, but still everybody was every bit as proud of that. And there was obviously rivalries back and forth between those buildings. And that sort of hit it home for me, that you can make this work. And the last thing I think any of us that here want to do is have a homogenized program that would be the same in every building. Because that just doesn't work. And that isn't really the way we approach it, and it isn't the way the articles were written. So I hope that answers that. No.
Do you want a clarifying question?
Yeah, I just think you're talking about costs, if we've got to have Spanish in one school, things like that. And whoever asked the question, I did not, wants to know their costs associated with making sure there are programs, core programs, I suspect, that are in all schools.
Pre-K?
Yeah.
Not all the schools offer pre-K.
Yeah.
So that to me is a pretty basic, equal opportunity that all kids in a new district should have. That is my question,
You
so.
asked the question, you could have asked.
No, I'm just saying,
One answer at a time.
that is my question, and I also had a pre-K question about that.
We'd be developing it in one budget, I mean,
But there are costs still.
there are costs.
But
We
And
don't know-
pre-K is a huge transportation drain for parents, so my question is basically, to make it an equal and add new opportunities, there needs to be pre-K in all these schools. I mean, I don't see that as I don't think that's fair if it isn't.
There has to be access to pre-K.
Yeah, I think that all three of these schools currently do pay for pre-K. They don't all provide it in the
Required by
schools,
law
but,
to.
yeah, so that's
Right,
already
and I
included in
understand
all
the 10
three of these
hours, but
budgets.
we have a full pre-K program in Dover.
Yeah.
We're for 3 and 4-year-olds. So, I mean, I would want to have it at all the schools, because this is one of the things we're trying to do, is expand opportunities. So there's definitely a cost involved, and even with the 10 hours and whatever, there's still more cost than that.
And transportation was one of the costs we looked at, how to move people around between the programs and make sure that everybody has access to that, and that could increase some of the costs. But then we may save some costs on the other side, because instead of maybe the person that was doing a program in another building, we all bring them to one building, and we can do it with one staff member instead of 3 staff members in each building, and then that person can do something different, like maybe run the library where they used to run the preschool. So there's so many possibilities. It's actually would be kind of an exciting thing to be in this new board, to set this new program up, because you almost get to start with a blank slate, and you've got your 3 easels set up, and then what do you create with those?
So can we move on from that question? This seems like a question that has been asked in a couple of different ways, and it seems like it should have a straightforward answer. Who pays the difference if Dover still wants to send children to Burton?
The electorate of this new district will make a determination once a year, just like we do now in Dover. There will be an article on the ballot or on the meeting date that would say, how much do you want to pay for your secondary tuition? And the number will be presented, and whatever that number is voted, it's available to all students in the district. That would be whatever schools vote to be in that district.
Laura,
Can I
you had a
clarify?
different- Laura, did you have a different answer?
I mean, there's no more Dover.
That's right.
Right.
Ah, okay.
Well, and I just wanted, I think the question is saying, if the tuition rate is the state average, and Burton's rate is, I don't know what it is, but I'm just gonna throw $1,000 more, who pays it? The parents pay it.
Okay.
Maybe,
Good. So they're,
nobody's really explained, and I've read the articles, I know how it works, how the voting works. Is it an overall vote, so that everybody understands? So if it's a landslide in one town and squeaks by, it's an overall vote of all voters in the
can I
district.
ask a clarifying question of what you're saying right now?
I don't think everybody
When you say the
understands.
vote, are you talking
So if
about
you're
the
voting for
vote
the budget.
on the budget? Oh, okay.
Yes,
And
so,
so I can explain that.
Yeah.
The reason it's not in the articles, because there's a state law that says if you're a unified school district, it's a vote of the electorate of that district. So it's no longer the 700 and some odd voters or 800 in Dover. It's the combine of those 3 towns. So if you want 50%, you have to add all the population, the voting population of those 3 towns. So if only 20 people from each town show up and 19 of them vote yes in each town, then it carries. It's just like now, if whenever you have an election, it's a majority of the entire group. It's not by individual towns, because there's no longer an individual town. It's the River Valley's Unified School District. So, Vicki, whatever.
no, and I just want to make sure everybody's
So,
clear
right, so
about
on that tuition thing too, though, is anybody can petition something to be voted on. So, I mean, it could just be that 30 people from Dover presented something to the unified board to vote on a different tuition rate, and everybody gets to weigh in on it. But it doesn't mean you don't have to have like certain people from each town. And as long as you're a registered voter in one of those 3 towns, you can bring something up to be voted on.
Okay, I'm gonna move on.
Yeah.
This is another specific question. Any idea how much Marlboro loses from the small schools grant if they act 7th and 8th grade to join this group?
There's an assumption that the small school grant would be cut because they don't have a 7-8 anymore. Even though it's part of the merger, I'm assuming that they don't get the full amount because they don't have 7-8 anymore, so.
Marlboro would not, if Marlboro joined the district, so they don't have 7th, 8th anymore, it doesn't matter. We've been told that we will get their current small school grant, because now it becomes a merger grant.
I understand that, but does the current rate stay the same even though they lost 2 grades?
They don't actually, Marlboro or the new district will continue to have to pay for those students. They just wouldn't be at the Marlboro school.
Okay, so it doesn't really
It's the
affect.
same amount of money
Right, fine.
would be passing through the new district.
But it's also a number that changes every year too. I mean, Dover, we used to be 70-something, this year we're 60-something. or whatever number she read off, I can't remember.
86,000. So here's another one. Because Dover has many second homeowners that contribute approximately, what would the percentage increase be if we opt out for primary homeowners?
If we opt out for
For
primary
primary
homeowners.
Yeah.
What do you mean?
Well, I think I know.
So if there's a
Okay, so-
vote no, what is the
So
impact
if we
going to
vote
be
no,
for
and just
primary?
losing the small school grant of $60,000, roughly $12,000 raises a penny on the residential side. So divide 12,
5 cents.
5 cents.
But didn't we calculate it could be as much as 8 cents?
Yeah, well, there's a whole bunch of variables in that
I
too.
mean, it's almost,
Right, and this year our ADM went up, our weighted average, so that helps us a lot. It depends what the CLA is. Just so everybody knows too, remember that a resident is only a house and 2 acres. So with a little credit for the 3 through 10, but everybody else pays the non-residential rate, and that doesn't move. It doesn't matter what we do, whether we merge or don't merge, or your non-residential rates are gonna stay the same, and they're set, I think, this year at about 55.
Yeah, I'm not concerned about the non-residential.
Right.
I'm concerned about the primary.
Well, you need to be concerned about it, because you own more than house and
acres?
residential.
You own more than 2 acres.
So all your other
Well,
property,
depends whether we want to talk to
Okay, so we're gonna move on.
Just one more point on
yeah.
that, if I can. Everybody should understand too, as Rich pointed out earlier, that the first year, there's an 8-cent incentive reduction in the residential tax rate. And that goes from 8 cents the first year to 6 to 4 to 2, and then to 0%, 0 pennies reduction after 4 more years, so.
and we do need to do one other thing. Dan brought a good point up in Marlboro, and we forgot it here. A lot of y'all pay on your income. And the income will change too, because your percentage of income, like the budget we're gonna propose you guys this year, last year you paid 2.81% of your income towards taxes in a broad stroke. There's a whole bunch of little things that go with that. This year, the budget we're presenting you will have you paying about 2.77 cents, so you're saving half a penny roughly. And that will also change, because now it's going to be blended just not on what Dover, but it's going to be blended on the Marlboro, Dover, and Wardsboro. So that number also changes by how much you spend and don't spend.
That's the homestead rebate.
So people may actually save some money. Residential may save some money, or they may not. And those are really hard numbers to project when we don't have a real budget to project it off of. And we don't know what the state's doing for their percentages, and I just got asked.
So we run out of time on that. We're gonna move on now to the last section, which is the timeline and process. And there's something funny about the projector. So there's gonna be partial text visible, but the whole text is oddly a little off.
But thank you, Matt, for bringing the projector.
Yes,
Yay!
thank you so much. Yeah, oh, there, I just like to. Yeah, okay, so there's.
A guy in that, I gotta read it here. Bad eyes. Okay, so where do we go from here? So this has been a funny conversation that I've had with folks lately. So when we go to town meeting and we vote yay or nay on the merger, we also are voting for new board members for the new unified board. So even if you vote nay, you should vote for a board member in case it does go through, because you should choose who you would like to represent your voice. So folks in Dover, folks in Marlboro, folks in Wardsboro will be taking out petitions to run for this board as well as the current school district board, because the current board will continue to operate as is until July 1st, 2019, when the new board then takes over, if all this goes through. So what's our time frame? So the new board, if this goes through, the new board can actually start working on March 8th, day after town meeting. We can get right down to business. We've got 2 years, which is not a whole lot of time, even though it sounds like a lot of time, to put together policies, to figure out how all these 3 schools are going to be budgeted and function as a collective unit. And work, so yeah, we've got a large list there, and that's a very small list, but it's a portion of what we'll be doing, figure out contracts, how we're gonna operate, transportation costs. Matt's gonna come to lots of meetings because he loves it. And like I said, we are going to continue to operate the regular schools for the next 2 years.
I can
That is
sort
weird.
of, I can sort of play with it.
Okay. This just kind of lays out what happens if some towns vote yes, some towns vote no. So if on town meeting day Marlboro votes no, Marlboro is, thank you. So in this merger process, Dover and Wardsboro are considered necessary for the merger to go through. Marlboro is considered advisable. The board decided that that was a good place for Marlboro to be because of the larger question of our 7th and 8th grade. So if Marlboro votes no and Dover and Wardsboro both vote yes, the merger can then go through. As Rich said earlier, the towns can petition to the state to form an alternative structure and say, hey, we did all this work, we really want to work together, we like each other, we want to be dance partners. Can you, let us continue dancing and keep our small schools grants and keep our ADM hold harmless and all those sorts of things. Marlboro can, at that point, choose to. There's another committee in Marlboro that is researching the alternative structure and what that would look like for our town if the vote doesn't go through. And then within a year, we'll have a sense as to how that looks. And within that year, Marlboro can then choose to rejoin the merged district. If it looks like the state's going to be like, you guys need to go back to your dance partners because that's the best for you. So we have 1 year to do that. If we come back to Wardsboro and Dover on March 9th, after 2018, and say, let us back in, Dover and Wardsboro then have to vote us back in because it would be after 1 year. If Dover votes no and Wardsboro and Marlboro vote yes, the merger technically fails. So Dover residents can petition for a revote. When I put the 10% in there, I was unclear on the number and I forgot to fix that.
I think it's 5, isn't it?
So it's 5% of the vote. So if 5% of the population says we want to revote, a petition can be signed, that can happen. And same thing goes if Wardsboro votes no and Marlboro and Dover vote yes, same process. If all towns vote no, then again, each town can do another revote if they choose, or they can also submit applications to the Agency of Education for alternative structure status, which means that they could operate as a standalone. What do you want?
I just wanted to know, since Marlboro's advisable, do they have a 5% petition as well, or is it just?
Yes, no, that's kind of like a universe for any vote.
So Marlboro's going to revote at 5%?
Yes.
Correct.
So, and as Rich said earlier too, there's another piece to this puzzle, which is this side-by-side notion that we have to be with the other side to Leland and Gray. So if the Leland and Gray Unified District says no, then the merger can also fail because we don't have a side to be a side with. This lingo is very strange. But if our 3 towns vote yes and we want to move forward, then we can say to the Agency of Education, we would be considered an alternative structure at that point. So those are our options. So, whoa, where's it going?
That's the last slide.
Oh, okay.
But, so, are you done? Or
Yes, I'm done.
Okay.
I don't know how to move that.
Okay, so on questions on the timeline, you can write them down. Again, it seems silly, but it's good to preserve documentation of professionalism.
Go back to the question you asked at the end of the last.
No, we're gonna answer the timeline questions first, and then we're gonna go to the broader, more philosophical questions, starting with that one. Okay, well, we've got a lot of questions.
Oh, okay.
So I think we're gonna,
We'll be on that.
after we get into the sort of general questions, we're gonna go back into the time.
Are you looking for questions?
Yeah, is this a timeline question?
It's a question about what she was just talking about, whatever that
Oh,
is.
yeah, that's a good one, okay. So I'll start with that one. So are any feeling from the committee members as to whether or not Leland and Gray are going to vote yes?
So we got a quarter before.
really got
I know that, you know, Newfane and Brookline have already become a joint contract town. I know that there are some schools that they had a mud study several years ago, and
Can you say what a MUD is?
a MUD is a
Makes sense.
modified unified union school district. And you know, the side-by-side MUDs, FUDs, all this stuff is great. They actually went to go to a vote, but then Act 46 came down the pike, so they kind of put it off. I think there's a lot of, you know, they've worked together for many years. Leland Gray's been in Union School District since the 60s. Dover was actually going to be part of that at one time, and we actually did a study in Dover to be part of that. So I would think that they'll get at least 2 schools, you know, Newfane and Brookline. Keep your fingers crossed. It'll be good for us.
Okay, there was another question under the timeline saying, what is the timeline for implementation? Has that question now been answered with that presentation?
Yeah, that was mine, and yeah.
Okay, good. So there aren't any more timeline questions. There are sort of grand questions. And then there are some specific directive questions to you guys asking for your opinions. So let's start with the
What
larger.
about that question that was asked before that they only got to mull over?
Right, and
That's
that's what I'm calling the grand question.
Okay, so the grand question was, if the state wasn't pushing consolidation, would any of the 3 boards see advantages to doing so,
So
pursuing the
in
structure?
Dover, we actually did.
Which, it might be helpful to hear from each person, because I'm sure that'll,
I'm sorry.
all of you must have different ideas about this. So why don't you start at the end? Jill, we haven't heard from you.
No pressure.
I did not have the impression that there would be a move forward with a merger if there were no Act 46 involved. So that's my opinion. I don't think so, but I think we would have been looking at, because we have a new principal who is actually in training this year with a mentor who was the previous principal. I think she would have been looking at the other schools in our area to see what they offer. It's not necessarily a merger question, but just to see what's offered.
I believe we're being forced into a merger. I don't think, in my opinion, not speaking for anybody else, I don't think residents or board members have a problem with particular elementary schools that we're representing and discussing. I don't feel like this discussion would be happening.
Yeah, I agree. I'm speaking from the standpoint not of the school board, but a community member in Marlboro. I would think that the discussions would continue with the, I get all these district names confused, but continue on with what's happening between the schools and within the district of doing money-saving consolidation things already, but not a merger.
So, yeah, I don't think that Marlboro would necessarily be looking to merge with anybody. I also know that the perspective from the rest of the state is that there is larger issues in the rest of Vermont. The southern half of the state has done some pretty good work, but the rest, Montpelier is having to govern for the entirety of the state and look out for the students in the entirety of the state. And even though I don't think that, Marlboro would be looking to merge with another school, I have to say that throughout this process, and I also said, just to back up a sec, I even said on the way over here, this is not new business. I mean, the state has been talking about consolidating districts for decades. This is just the newest one. But also, Marlboro did a lot of talking to people and that hasn't happened before. Because we are the only K-8 school in Windham Central, we talked a lot to schools in Windham Southeast Supervisory. I spent hours going to Dummerston and to Putney and talking to folks in Guilford, who also within the last 5 years closed their 7th and 8th grade. I talked to schools in Brattleboro. I talked to folks, all around us, up in Windham Northeast, and we reached out to Halifax, and members of the board from Wardsboro came and talked to us. We spent a lot of time trying to figure out what the best option was for Marlboro, because we are the odd duck. We love our supervisory union. We have a strong relationship with our supervisory union. We've worked with Windham Central for a long time, and Dover and Wardsboro know us, and the central office knows us. And after a lot of conversations, and we had a study committee within our own town before we joined this, we had about a dozen people. We decided that this was what was best for our kids, to work with other small communities that know us, that are familiar to us, that also have the same missions in their schools and love their schools as much as we do, and we could have equal voice, even though it was a hard decision to come to. And it still is a hard decision to come to because, of the 7th and 8th grade piece, but I think that's why we came to sit at this table.
Me? I think this is a great question. I think this might be, no offense to Marlboro, maybe the best question we've gotten. The reason it's so good is because we all know, and everyone on this board knows, that we were kind of forced to come together. We were pushed by the state to come together and work something out. And so the question is, after being pushed together, did you see any advantages to doing this at this point, after going through the whole process? And by being together, we all were able to talk about different advantages, opportunities, tax savings, all these different issues that we may not have talked about before. And personally, when I came into this from Wardsboro, I think maybe the other towns as well, thought, I want to make sure I preserve what Wardsboro has, and I want to make sure Wardsboro gets a fair shake and we get the opportunities that are afforded us. And I think we've gotten that and a little bit more. I think there are a lot of advantages for Wardsboro, and I think it's a good thing for us, only having been through it. Had we not gone through it, we may not have realized some of those advantages that are out there now because of this group. So that's the way I look at it.
I would say no.
Maybe you might restate the question and then say no to it.
This is not the legislature.
So it's clear what it is you're saying no to.
If the state wasn't pushing consolidation, would any of the 3 boards see advantages in doing so? So if the state hadn't pushed it, I don't believe that the board that I've sat on for 14, 15 years would have done this.
Right.
So, I have a lot of thoughts about what's happened since, but.
And I have to concur actually with what everybody has said. I've been on the school board on and off for over 30 years now, and this is the best educational series of discussions that I have ever been engaged with. It's been wonderful in many ways to be looking at the kids and wondering how we can improve their education. However, the answer to the question is still no. We would not have been here, and I don't believe in the final analysis that a merger will be to the benefit of Marlboro. Despite the fact that these talks have been great, I don't think that the merger would in fact be great for Marlboro.
Well, I'm Jill, Lucy, Dwight, and myself. We're not school board members, so I can't really answer yes or no because I haven't been involved in the discussions that have taken place over the years with the 3 school boards. I think I said earlier as I was rambling on, and I gave my own opinion of Act 46, which I'm not a big fan of, but I do have to concur with a lot of what has been said here. And going through this process, it really was an eye-opener to see, one, how similar we are, to see the kinds of things that are already being shared across the supervisory union that I didn't necessarily know about, and to see what the future could hold. And that future could be pretty good together. There's certainly things that could be bad, things that may not work out well. There's going to be tons of unintended consequences, as there always are with things like this. But I keep coming back to, this still comes back to, I just said that twice, this still comes back to, this is probably the best way to control our own destiny, as opposed to taking a chance on what the state may or may not do with alternative structures, may or may not do with changing the interpretation of Act 46. You just don't know. So given where we're at in time, it's not a bad deal.
Yeah. Yes.
I just haven't seen.
You took my chair.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, okay. I agree with everything that Randy was just kind of summarizing, and I guess being the last guy at the end of the table, I suddenly realized I'm going to leave everybody with the last thoughts and comments on this, which Laura wanted to do.
Yeah, no, Rich is.
That's why he stepped away. The short answer, of course, is no. If the state had not forced Act 46 upon us, no, we probably wouldn't have been engaged in these discussions. I also am not a big fan of Act 46. I view it as just kind of rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic. I mean, there obviously is a fundamental educational funding problem here in Montpelier, but that's being driven more by lack of jobs, lack of growth in the student population and everything, but instead we're forcing small districts in southern Vermont to merge, consolidate, find savings so we can just shovel more money up to Montpelier so they can give it to Burlington, Chittenden County, Montpelier, Rutland, etc.
Okay.
He's the money guy.
Yeah. Having said that, it has been a real eye-opening experience for me as a member of the Dover School Board. I'm really impressed not only with what we've been accomplishing in Dover, but what I've learned about both Wardsboro and Marlboro during this process. I'm actually pretty excited about what we might be able to do over the next couple of years with this merged school district. And as Randy kind of said, I'm also excited about the fact that we are at least maintaining the illusion of local control down here, as opposed to having some faceless bureaucrat in Montpelier dictate to us what's going to happen.
Can I ask a quick follow-up?
Well, let him
Rich,
answer, and
keep
then,
it-
yeah.
Keep it.
So I'm gonna keep it short.
Rich brief or brief?
Yes,
Start your time.
because unlike what Laura's forgetting, but I think Vicky was here, maybe it was even before Vicky, we actually did. We, in Dover, met with Whitingham and Wilmington. We looked at a joint school district, unified school district. Not that many years ago, and Laura, I know, was there, and I
don't think that was.
Well,
No, I was there.
No, okay, Vicky was there, but then, just a few years ago, we met with Wardsboro, looking at maybe we could hire a principal together. So we in Dover have always been looking for ways to save money and to do things, maybe get bigger bang for our bucks. So we have looked into this. And I love I've actually been able to collect back to 1950. I have at least a copy of every town report since then. And you look at the school report, so back in the 50s, your grandmother, Dot, and June Mundell, and Shirley Mead were on a committee with Leland and Gray. Pardon?
May they rest in peace.
Yes, may they rest in peace. And they all, they were looking at a joint district with Leland and Gray. Then we looked at a joint district with, we jumped over Wilmington, went to Whitingham in the early 60s. So over the years, this is nothing new. We've been doing this. We've done these studies. We went to votes. We went to a vote when I was chairman on the board earlier in my career, when I still had hair. We looked at doing a joint district, and we had a vote with Wilmington and Whitingham, and Wilmington and Whitingham decided to pull a fast one on us and not vote the same night. And, so it has happened. I think we need to do it. I think we continue to do it because there's always a better way to skin a cat. And I think in Dover we've always been progressive, and to be progressive we would be looking at things. And I think this has been a great exercise. And even if we don't do something with this, hopefully it will lead to something else that will prove positive for all of us.
Okay.
Just, it's a yes or no answer. Can we just go straight down the line? Currently, would you recommend to your constituents voting yes or no?
You are allowed to opt out of that should you wish to do so.
Well, that's not the purpose of this meeting.
Yeah.
The purpose of this meeting is to just inform the electorate, to our opinion.
I would say perhaps if you want to ask that question privately to people afterwards, you're more than welcome to.
The Dover boards had a discussion about this. Do we recommend yes or no to the voters? And we want to present the facts to the voters. We want the voters to decide, not based on us giving them our opinion how they should vote, but we want them to have a discussion.
So here is a somewhat related question that I think you actually can answer. How many of you study committee members are running for the unified board?
Well, if you want to sign my petition.
How about a raise of hands?
Yeah, raise of hands would be great. Oh, good. Nice. So here's another straightforward question. Is anyone researching the alternative structure for Dover?
No, because we're not there yet.
Here's another potentially yes or no or short answer, maybe not.
Yeah, let's go back to that one though, but part of the study, or part of what we're gonna use is what's happening now, and what the vote, outcome of the vote will be also utilized in our alternative structure application.
Should we make?
Should we have to go that way?
So changes coming in Montpelier administration, why should we do this now? Is revisiting this next year. In revisiting this next year, we might have a better understanding. Once this is done, it's done.
By next year, the state will have already signed. We have until July of this year, and although the administration is changing, if you go look at the education group in the House and the Senate, hasn't changed that much. And remember, what the House Act 46 gave us was not what they tried to get by 2 years previous to that. So this has been a freight train coming, it's been that battleship headed our way, and you ain't gonna make it move.
Yeah.
Laura,
Laura, you gonna add to that?
Yeah, I don't see the administration trying to roll this back. I don't see it getting repealed. I think there is a fair amount of desire in the House, at least, to see some extensions and changes. There's some pretty harsh impacts that are starting to materialize. But I don't think we're going to see big changes in this. There are bills that have been introduced, a couple of bills, one for extensions, but there's absolutely no telling. I think the House Education Committee, the folks that have been on there since last year, to the best of my knowledge, are all saying no extensions. I don't know what new members are. I don't know what new members are saying.
How about the alternative structures? Because I've been reading that there's some move afoot to try to determine, nobody's tested it yet. Nobody's tested it. Stowe was talking about it. I think Vernon's probably going to be right up on the list. There's some discussion about alternative structures and how they're going to be defined, and since it hasn't been tested yet, that's really interesting to me to know where that because they're going to have some alternative structures. I can imagine it's in the law. So can you speak to that?
There's also a bill to look at the alternative structures, to give some more time. There's going to be additional bills on that. Here's what I would say. There's a whole lot of change going on in Montpelier. Okay, we can do nothing, inaction, waiting. This is what we have in front of us right now. I think the best thing to do is this is what I'm telling all of my constituents to do in all of my towns, okay? And I've got towns in another SU too. We just have to do the next best thing, do the next thing that we can. If it's work, we're gonna do what's been asked. We've been asked to have conversations with our neighbors to see what we can do. Do it, and provide the answer back to the state, and then what is the next thing? And then what is the next thing? Right now we are in a situation where there is massive change in the entire system in the state, and so we can try and curl in and deflect. I don't know that that's as productive as what we're doing now. We're doing what's been asked. We're going to answer the question. We don't know what the voters are going to say. So I'm probably going on and on at this point, but is that helpful at all? Not satisfying.
So, yeah.
I think also, everybody should keep in mind that we are a legal entity, and we have a vote coming up at town meeting. Even if the legislation changes, I don't imagine that this deadline of this coming town meeting would be extended by a vote of the legislature. I don't believe it could be.
It's not going to be in time. There are going to be some consequences for town meeting that are going to be unavoidable. So I don't think they're going to be prioritizing rolling back.
And to be really honest, I would be really upset if they extended it, because we did our work. We busted our asses. We had 3 meetings a month. No, and if they were to extend it, it's not fair.
Yeah, just yesterday it was reported the State Board of Education refused to consider 2 alternative structures that were included in a larger side-by-side district proposal for one of the Rutland County districts. So they're not even thinking about it at the AOE or the state board. Yeah, so Laura's probably right, they're gonna have to extend that. But that really doesn't change what we have to do here.
More questions on that particular issue?
Yeah, so you said that because we have this vote coming up in March, even if things change within the legislature, we have sealed our fate by going to the towns for this. Is there any way you could put into your language at some point in time, you're shaking your head.
Yeah, go ahead though, go ahead and finish your question, but I
That
think the answer's gonna be no.
pending
Yeah.
changes within the legislature that may affect decisions.
So the articles that were created by this committee have been presented and approved, and they are the ones that are going to be voted on at town meeting. So to amend the articles would just be a long time consuming process. I don't know how it would work, but I can't imagine it working.
We also had that discussion in Wardsboro, one of the first meetings, about putting something in the articles, and we were told it wouldn't fly.
I want to say something
Yeah.
here. So I very strongly resist the notion that we have a gun to our head, okay? We should not vote to do this simply because we feel like we have a gun to our head. And I think the committee would say that I've been fairly consistent, that we should be looking for increased opportunities for our kids. I think you've heard a lot of the committee members say that they see opportunities, potential for opportunities. I think, that's what these meetings are about. But you know what, Chip? I'm sorry, Trip. Sorry, I know it's been a long day. I'm sorry. Your vote should be the same, regardless as to what, that's kind of what I'm getting after. I think the conversations that we've been having are worthwhile. Whether or not we have uncovered something that is beneficial to our students is for the voters to decide. It's not for us to decide, if the legislature's gonna make us do it.
Yeah.
The legislature's trying to make us do it, but we, the original question was, can we improve opportunities for our kids? That's the question that we should be focused on answering.
We were at a tipping point, about 2 months ago. We got through the draft of the articles. I think it was at the meeting in Dover. We had to make a vote. Were we gonna accept the articles to send off to the state, or were we gonna continue to work on it, push the deadline out? We all felt we'd gone as far as we could with what we had. Let's put it out there for the voters to decide. And so that echoes what Laura said. I don't think this could have waited any longer. You guys voted down, you voted down, and we move on from there. That's your choice.
The vote was not unanimous to
No, it was not.
present them. There were people who dissented at that point and thought there should be extra time spent on creating the articles.
Yeah,
It's
go ahead.
sort of first, value the work of the study committee, really great. 2 meetings a month, 6 months. More along Laura, I like that you're taking that stance, but I don't understand how when the state says after 2019 we get to have a say, how is that not a gun to your head? I don't understand.
So,
We have control now, we don't have control after 2019. So I don't know what you're saying to people about
well,
that.
I believe.
Just because I have the same questions coming from my town.
I fundamentally believe, it's government of the people. So, we have some laws that we've been asked, we like them, we don't like them, we get engaged, and, we do what we can to impact the process. We have a say. You have a say. In multiple ways, you have a say.
So I'm gonna stop this now, because it seems like a weighty conversation. You can
Yes.
really, really deep.
Yes.
And so here's something that I think is also weighty, but potentially non-problematic answers. Where do you foresee savings?
Well, in Marlboro, we got asked that, and the easy savings is each town does an audit. Well, there won't be any more town districts, there'll be one district, so you save one audit, or you save two audits instead of one.
But
Or instead of
$16,000
three.
$2 million.
Right, no, and again, it's small amounts of money. It goes back to, can you use the services of maybe somebody's in one building and they can do stuff in both buildings and you can reduce some staff. Newfane and Brookline combined a few years ago, and I had a lot of arguments with the chairman of the board at the time about, she was telling us how wonderful it was and all this great things they did. So I said, I love Missouri, show me. Show me where the savings are. So, where their savings were, they closed the building.
But
And
nobody here wants to do that.
I know that, Chip, that's what I'm saying, it's with Trip. I'm sorry.
Chip, go out there and say.
So, but anyways, you know, the thing
We're gonna
is,
change his name.
we weren't, again, until this new board gets together and until it makes some decision on how it's gonna operate, you know, the big savings they see is, you know, instead of buying paper for one building, you're buying it for 3 buildings. But we already do stuff like that. You know, we buy it at district level. Saving oil, well, we tried buying oil at the district level. It was cheaper buying it with the town buying group than it was. So we don't know, but they would give us some more ability because we will have greater numbers. And the other savings may be, and one of the things that Doug and I have had a lot of talks about is, you know, in special ed, sometimes you have a person move in with an IEP that's rather expensive, and when you're spreading it over 50 students and that additional cost, it goes up a lot more. But if you spread it over 150 students, well, now it's that much more, so it's not as much of a bump in the road. And then also, if in those now, instead of what happens in each individual town, it's happening in some conglomerate of all numbers. So if a few families move in and a few move out, well, maybe they moved from Dover to Marlboro, so our overall numbers haven't changed, you know, where Marlboro would be saying, we got 5 new students, what do? We didn't plan for this. And Dover says, what happens to the 5 students' money that we don't have anymore? So those are the kind of things, and again, we wish we could give you specifics to show this was the best thing since sliced bread, but it's not there, we can't do it.
Yeah, go ahead, Dan.
So the consultant that we hired, John Everett, did identify some savings. Some of them is the audit, some of them is school board expenditures, which I question, but it basically amounted to 2 pennies on the tax rate, and the weighted average tax rate of the 3 districts is $1.58. Savings was about 2 pennies on that, of things that he could identify right now that might be saved if we were to merge.
So there's a question related to this, which I imagine is the follow-up question, which how can the money/tax estimate be accurate when the new unified board has not agreed on what to spend money on?
Exactly.
You can't.
So why are you saying
So
that
we
we're
basically-
saving money if you don't know?
So the estimate is based on current school budgets. So we took the 3 current budgets and basically took Marlboro's budget and Dover's budget and Wardsboro's budget, added them all together, and then divided that up amongst our 417 students that we have between the 3 towns.
And we
So
also
that-
reduced those few items that we knew we could
Right,
reduce.
right, so
Right.
yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, it's a model.
Yeah.
We created a model of existing numbers, not future numbers, because we knew this question would come up tonight. So we said, and I've kind of resisted it the whole time because I didn't want to answer that question yes or no. We wanted to just say what the current model is, what it might look like, but we really can't tell you what it will look like in the future.
Yeah.
Well, just to extrapolate that, your individual school boards, you can't predict what your budget is gonna be like in 2 years, so how could you say what it's gonna cost the taxpayers in 2 years?
Well,
It's just, it would be a different group.
I asked that question only because you would be taking on Marlboro, and Marlboro would have changes to its building and operating structure, and so you'd have to figure out, what are you gonna do with the kids that have to leave now to go to middle school? Like, that's an expense you might have to take on with transportation or something.
Yeah, it may be, and the other 2 schools already deal with that, so it's not like it's uncharted territory. It's just figuring out how to make it work with 3 schools instead of 1 school.
And again, remember the tax rate too is based not on what you spend, but it's also income you bring in. And that doesn't mean just income from the state either, it means income from other sources like tuition and preschool tuition. So there's all these numbers. Basically, the number we came up with also kept the grants instead of losing the grants, you know, the small school and the hold harmless, and that was all figured into it also. But I can't tell you what Dover's budget's gonna be next year.
Laura, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, and the size of these schools are such that the opportunity probably is more in terms of increased opportunity as opposed to tax savings. Which is
Well,
the
that's
point.
the frustrating part, and not to comment, but I
Just
feel
that
like,
one.
I feel like we're all being sold it with tax incentives, and the opportunities are like hanging out non-concrete back here. But it's really supposed to be, should the opportunities be concrete up front, and we talk about taxes later? I just feel like that's, you know, that's how people are being sold on the vote.
So, yeah, that's
Not in
another.
Gentleman in the hat had his hat up.
You have a hand.
Kind of tag along a little bit, other than the audit, and I'm sorry, there's one other
example you gave for cost savings?
School board?
Like, is there any plans to possibly have one principal?
That's up to the new board.
It's up to the new board.
The new board may
So other than
decide
those
it's best
two-
to have 5 principals, I
Understood.
don't know.
Other than those two specifics, there's no other concrete ideas of cost savings?
Yes, there is. The loss in grants is a loss of income, which causes a raise in the amount of money you have to spend.
But we're not sure that we lose it.
I know you will lose the hold harmless, so that's an increase for Wardsboro. We haven't been told we wouldn't. We also haven't been told we would get to keep it, but
It's a
the
risk.
one thing I would bet is that the small school grant's gonna go away. And, you know, I've done budgets for 25 years, and I know the state, and I know how they're gonna play games, and if they don't do it by taking it away, then they'll decrease the amount of money that we get per pupil, they'll change the weighting of the students, they'll do something, and they'll take it away from us one way or another.
Well, and then your per pupil cost will go up and they'll penalize you on the backside of it.
So they
too.
make more money that way.
Yeah, that's what's happening in Twin Valley right now.
So I think this question doesn't really have an answer, but this is a good one to end on. And again, it'd be good to hear a variety of different voices in the answer to this one. So Act 46 is forcing local towns and school districts to make tough decisions about governance and educational spending. What steps are the bloated AOE and BT state taking to control education spending?
So,
Go ahead.
so it was AOE and who else?
The Vermont state government.
Okay,
You may not want to do this first.
Is their salaries?
No, I mean,
Yeah,
I think the question could be directed towards members of the committee in relationship to the research that you've done, and not necessarily the positions that you hold, but the research that you've done and while serving on this committee.
We did not research anything with the AOE or the state of Vermont. It was not part of our study.
I would say to you that most of the AOE functions are federally directed and federally funded, which is problematic. So there's not really a lot of state funding. It's really hard to get positions into the AOE for our purposes, actually. And with regard to the state budget, we either need to cut services or raise taxes.
Well,
You said that so quietly.
Cut services or
she's
raise
going to have to go back to
taxes.
Montpelier.
I don't think we're raising taxes.
The interesting thing about Act 46 was Oliver's 2% cap that came out in the first year, which actually did control spending statewide. And of course, that also hit the big districts, and they started squeaking about it, and then the 2% cap went away. Had that stayed, or had there been some modified cap, you'd probably still be seeing some savings. If you looked at what happened in the current fiscal year, there were savings.
There's discussion about caps again, but it's a different kind of cap. And, you know, there's also a lot more discussion about rural and rural weighting.
Well, it's criminal. And
Does everybody understand the 2% cap? Yeah, can somebody, in a nutshell, explain the 2% cap to people?
Well, basically, one of the components of the original part of Act 46 was a 2% spending cap on every district in the state of Vermont. So basically, if you went over the 2% threshold, there were penalties, and I don't know exactly what those
But it was
penalties
tied to
were.
growth rate, and that's how people get districts to.
Right.
So
So
it's
say that
basically-
louder.
Yeah.
It was tied to a growth rate, which is how it ended up hitting the districts.
And
Did everybody hear that?
No.
It's tied to a growth rate.
so basically, it affected all spending, not just spending based on per pupil cost, which to me has always been a red herring.
All large increasers of spending.
Large increases, regardless of whether you were a big
Big or
district, small district. And a lot of people didn't like that.
Right. So, I mean, the big problem at the statewide level, I don't know if everybody's familiar with what's going on right now in Twin Valley. So their budget's down $750,000 this year. Wilmington's looking at a 20-cent tax increase. Whitington's looking at a 50-cent tax increase.
in the Deerfield Valley.
And in Montpelier, they're saying, oh, well, they're spending too much per pupil. So, I mean, it's an alternate universe.
It is,
So
and that's such a red herring, that per pupil cost, and, you know.
it's not red herring.
Well, it's.
Okay, guys,
Okay.
what you're having in your.
Then we'll have a.
Move on.
Yeah, let's have one more question from the floor, and then I think we can call it a night.
You know, I was going to say something about the
Yes, go ahead,
AOE
Dan.
because it had been mentioned as a bloated bureaucracy up there. And I will say that in my opinion, the AOE threw up a huge smokescreen to the alternative structures. It didn't come out of either the House or the Senate as onerous and troublesome to apply for the alternative structure as the rules came back from, state board. So we can't holler at our legislators because they wrote a law which would have been easier for alternative structures to be passed through. And they became more difficult after they went to the bloated bureaucracy. So I want to say that much about the AOE and the Board of Ed too. I'm not sure who's responsible, but someone other than the legislator.
There's legislation to.
Right. So support legislation to simplify alternative structure proposals.
So one more question.
So just quickly with what you said, Laura came to us originally and said, hey, think out of the box, think of different things originally. That obviously has been kicked back by the state in whatever manner. My question to you guys is, with a new administration and a new Secretary of Education, certainly leaning towards trying to have choice of schools for everybody, schools union like Leland and Gray that essentially says you gotta come here and come here, correct? How do you think that's gonna have an effect on all of Vermont?
What is your question?
So,
what is your question?
with the new administration, new secretary,
There isn't a new secretary yet, and there may not be. Keep going.
assuming she's confirmed, and she may not, okay, but assuming she is, with her thoughts on choice for education, alternative schools, et cetera, how do you
Oh,
think?
you mean at the
He's talking
federal
about
level? You're talking
Yeah,
about
I'm
federal.
talking about the big administration.
Yeah.
How do you think that would play down to the states, and what effect might that have?
Yeah, okay, that's a good one to end on.
I'll give you my opinion on that. I think that Leland and Gray and Twin Valley are economically, geographically necessary schools.
Yep.
And so you go for expanded choice, you are impacting in an unknown way the economy in Windham.
And you're also affecting the Dover students, because if Twin Valley was to close in Leland and Gray, there's 2 less schools for the kids to choose from, our students to choose from. And it's a real burden for people to go to Burton. Now, almost everybody I know who's had any involvement in Burton has either wound up moving over there, renting an apartment over there, or somehow making it easier, one parent living over there, doing something, because it's a long trip. And you take away our 2 closest schools, and your Brattleboro was a choice where some people complain because it's a 40-minute ride. And then where's your next choice? Bellows Falls, Springfield? So I think I'd also like to see those schools find a way to survive.
So, I'm just gonna remind everybody of the blog spot, that some of these, I don't wanna put more work on your hands, but you type up the answers to these questions, so that you can go and review them, on the blog. And the questions asked at Marlboro in the last week's meeting are also there. And then the next meeting schedules, I'm trying to get up with this thing.
Monday in Wardsboro.
It's Monday in a week on the 23rd at Wardsboro, and then, the next one is the 2nd of February in Wardsboro, so the 23rd and the 2nd of February, then the 13th back at Marlboro, and the 27th back here. So invite your friends,
Yes.
since you'll all be voting on the 7th of March.
This is awesome.
Thank you all for coming. Thank you.
Thank you for coming out.
Thank you. Thank you for all your work. Thank you.
Thank you guys for coming.
Do you want me to stick these in the sack?